Hi, I'm Kimberly from Kimberly Yoga. Today I'm going to break down downward facing dog, also known in Sanskrit as Adho Mukha Svanasana. Downward facing dog is most often a transitional posture. You're going to move through downward facing dog on your way to some other posture. It's also referred to as a resting station sometimes. This will most likely be in your vinyasa flow style classes where you're moving one breath to one movement and everything is really geared towards getting your heart rate up. You'll find that downward facing dog is going to be the one place where you get to stop and breathe for a couple minutes or a couple breaths, but they'll also probably invite you into child's pose if downward facing dog doesn't allow you the rest that you would like for recovery. I will say, though, that downward facing dog is also a stabilizing posture. You pretty much have to engage everything in your body to maintain the full expression in really strong and safe alignment. So, today, what we're going to talk about is how to establish your foundation for a strong downward facing dog. And also, we'll talk about some modifications. Now, I want to share with you that I recently recovered from a serious illness that basically knocked me all the way down to my seat. So I went from being really strong, really active, to kind of having to sit and rebuild my entire practice from the ground up. So I actually had to use some of the modifications that I'm going to show you today as a way to build my practice, to rebuild strength and get back into downward facing dog. And until about a month and a half ago, I couldn't sustain a downward facing dog. 2 months ago, it hurt. So, so I'm just coming to you from a place of I just got back into my downward facing dog, and I'm going to show you how I did it. We'll start in tabletop, hips, knees below your hips, shoulders, elbows, wrists in alignment. Your hands are your foundation for downward facing dog. So you want to spread your fingers wide. Spread your fingers wide and press through your fingerprints and the outer ring of your palm. The center of your palm, you want to feel slightly lifting, as if you don't want to squish a pea if one were underneath your hand. So find your tabletop, spread your fingers wide, grip the mat like a starfish. If you're ready to move on to your downward facing dog, take an inhale, and on the exhale, pull your navel gently to your spine as you lift your hips up and back. Sometimes you'll need to widen your stance. Sometimes people will invite you to pedal it out. I like to bend my knees, and then without moving my chest, just lift my hips up towards the earth. You could also bend your knees, tuck your tailbone down a little, and then feel maybe like a little ripple through your spine and allow your head to settle between your biceps. You want to be really careful here not to extend too far. You don't want to overextend your shoulders. You really want your biceps to be in alignment with your ears. If your shoulders feel tight, you can turn your fingers out towards the edges of your mat, or you can keep your fingers straight forward, but open your hands towards the edges of your mat. Pull your low ribs in. And there. You should be in a strong downward facing dog. This feels really strong for me here. If you're working up to your downward facing dog and you can release your knees to the floor, keep your toes tucked though here. Keep your hands active. And you're just going to release your head as if you're in a downward facing dog, but it's with your knees down. We call it puppy pose. So that's one option. If you want to build strength in the shoulders to start working back up, to start working towards the downward facing dog, release your forearms to your mat. Interlace your fingers here. Keep your toes tucked. And then every time you exhale, press into your forearms and lift your knees off of the floor. You can lift your knees a couple of inches, or you can lift them up so that your legs are straight. This is a great place to start building and stabilizing your shoulder girdle so that when you do move into downward facing dog, it is from a strong and supported place. Of course, if you have no interest in downward facing dog or you need to rest, you can always release your toes, release the tops of your feet onto your mat, and go into child's pose. A lot of times you'll be encouraged to keep your arms extended out long, but I still have some tightness happening in my shoulders, so I keep my elbows bent here. Always remember to relax your head. If you want to create more space in your child's pose, you can always open your knees to the edges of your mat and sink your heels back even further, and you might find more space to release your head to your mat. From child's pose, come back up into tabletop, find your foundation, tuck your toes, and on the exhale, lift your hips up and back to downward facing dog.